It's probably a real breakthrough year for over-the-top market. I mean, we have seen evidence of that already in 2010, but it will be even more obvious in 2011. Maybe the most important thing here is that convergence is finally happening, but not the way the industry had planned it to happen, because it happens in the palm of the user, in the tablet market, where you have genuine convergence, where you have multimedia, where people do chat, conversation, video, downloading, games, TV, everything, and it's all provided through the broadband pipe that the operators are providing. So that was not how the industry thought about it when they planned for IMS and RCS and everything else around that. So we even believe that revenues for over-the-top providers would exceed operator revenues for such services. I mean, not considering now voice and messaging, but in other services it will exceed operator revenues, and that's because the operators haven't really managed to develop those revenue streams over the last 10 years anyway, while the basically complete ecosystems provided by Android and Apple are addressing the basic needs. You know, if you look at it from a developer perspective, they have a huge marketplace with both Apple and Android. They have payment mechanisms, they have reach of customers. So many of the things that they traditionally have been concerned about are resolved by those platforms, and that's why we think it will be a breakthrough year for it. I think, you know, on one hand, I think you will really have a very widespread markets, from the kind of Swiss Army knife products like iPad to very dedicated devices. I mean, the underlying trend sort of fueling this to happen is the very competitive nature we have had in the chip and device market for a 5-year period. So to put a 3D chip into a device is very, very affordable and can be done by many players, both in specialized segments of the market but in a wider context. And I mean, traditionally we've been complaining about the industry and why services of various kinds are not taking off, it has been because of to characterize it as a Swiss Army knife concept, where it has everything, but every dedicated service there is inferior to the real thing, if you take a pair of scissors or a knife or anything. But it looks like with touchscreens, you know, you're removing some of the traditional challenges with the Swiss Army knife product, because with just a click on a screen you can change service and application very quickly. So many of the traditional barriers are disappearing. Our view is that operators are in the healthiest sector of the communications industry. Sometimes when we look at operators and discuss operators, we are looking at them as we have seen them from the last 10 years. And for the last 10 years, it has been an ultra-competitive market, which is a result of an over-establishment of number of operators, which happened in conjunction with the 3D licensing 10 years ago. So that has led to very intensive price competition, and therefore operators have looked to be vulnerable. But for the last few years, we see a trend where there is a consolidation in the operator market, where marginal subscale players are being squeezed out or embraced by bigger players. So in many European markets, that goes for Sweden, for the UK, and elsewhere, you see consolidation. leading to from an operator perspective, much more healthier environment. So we think the period of intensive price pressure is over, really. And actually, a few years from now, we will have an opposite trend where the biggest concern for consumers, consumer organizations, and regulators will be the potential lack of competition among operators. So, in that perspective, when people talk about the threat from over-the-top providers, the threat from Google, then we are just looking at it from a historical perspective, and in our view, the absolutely healthiest segment of the industry will be operators. It will be a very kind of managed competition-like market with 3 to 4 players. You have an enormous growth in the internet's over-the-top market, and what they will do is to provide all the exciting services and devices which we just seen at the beginning of this year. So operators are in very good shape, and therefore everything else, over the top, the two-sided business models, advertising revenues, and what have you, is just it's interesting but not important for their future.